everyone, I'm Corey, also known as Cormac, and welcome to my channel, This and That Cormac. If you're new here, thank you for taking the time to check out this video, and if you're a returning viewer, I really appreciate that you've come back to check out another video that I'm sharing. So this week's video is going to be another from scratch cooking and pantry restock. I know these types of videos are really helpful to a lot of people, so I enjoy sharing what I'm doing each week in our kitchen and what I'm putting away for my family, and hopefully some of these meals and some of these ideas that I'm sharing is something that is going to be useful to you and your family. So let's get to it and let's see this week's video. So I've taken this large log of Hamburg and broken it up into 3 pieces of somewhat equal size. And I've decided that I'm going to do some Coney sauce, I'm going to do some meatballs, and I'm also going to do some shepherd's pie for my husband because it's one of his favorite meals. And I'm just cleaning out some stuff in the freezer and make some meals. So the first thing I'm going to make with some of the Hamburg is Coney Island sauce. Coney Island sauce is something we've enjoyed. I grew up with it. My mom had gotten a recipe from my aunt's mom, and we always had it as a treat on our hot dogs growing up. So I like to stock some in the freezer and put it away for whenever we decide to have hot dogs. So I'm trying out a new tool here that I really didn't care for separating the meat. It kept getting stuck, and I'm definitely going to go back and use the one that I normally use because I had a really difficult time grinding this meat up with this particular tool. I got frustrated, so I ended up going back to the one that I use all the time, and that worked a lot better. But what you're going to do is you're going to grind up the meat into smaller pieces and let this begin cooking. And once it's browned up, I choose to use butter. The original recipe called for crisco, and I really try not to use crisco if I can absolutely help it. I'd rather use an organic butter or a natural butter if you can find one for the fat for the Coney Island sauce. So this is what I'm doing here. I just cut it into smaller pieces because I find it melts down just that much quicker, and just you mix it around in the meat. You can use crisco if you'd like to, but again, I'd try to avoid that stuff if I can help it. Next, you're going to add some tomato paste, and I will have all of the measurements for this recipe, if not a link to a PDF of this recipe, in my description box below. But you're going to add tomato paste, and you're going to mix this around really well into the Hamburg and the butter. Next, I'm adding some white vinegar. I'm adding some ground mustard. Followed by some garlic powder. And then you're going to stir this in. And then I'm adding some chili powder, a couple of tablespoons of this. This recipe calls for 4 tablespoons. Sometimes I think it's a little much, but I guess it depends on your taste. So I usually try to go with a little less. And then we're going to stir this a bit more. This is what it looks like when it's done. I'm going to let it cool, and then I'm going to bag it for the freezer. So I prepped some snack size bags to put the Coney sauce in. I generally use snack size because we only use a little bit of Coney sauce. It's just my husband and I. My daughter does not like it. So using a snack size bag usually works out perfect for each of us to have a hot dog or 2. And then what I'll do is get these ready to go in the freezer, and then they'll be ready to take out whenever I need them. I saw these bag holders on another video, and I didn't realize how handy these things were. I figured, I don't need these things, but I realized I put a lot of stuff into bags and it's nice to have this stuff held open. So I will link these in my description box below. So after I squeeze some of the air out of the smaller snack size bags, I then take a freezer bag, and this is what I put the snack size bags into, and I try to squeeze some of the air out of that, just a little bit. I mean, I'm going to be reopening these, and then it's going to go in the freezer, and then I can grab each of these bags for having Coney dogs whenever we need them. So the next thing I was making with that meat that I'd separated from the freezer is homemade meatballs. I'm adding an egg to a little over 1.5 pounds of ground beef, and then I'm going to add some minced garlic. You can also use fresh garlic. It does not have to be from the jar. This was just what I have, and I'm trying to use it up. Next, I'm going to add some breadcrumbs. Again, I'll list the measurements for these ingredients in a recipe in my description box for you if you'd like to print it out. I'm loosely using a recipe I found online. Here I'm adding some garlic herb seasoning and then some Italian seasoning. Now I'm adding some minced onion. I usually like to use fresh chopped onion, but I am out of some right now, so I'm just using the minced, which works good, but use whatever you have or whatever you'd like to use on hand. And then you're going to take this and mix it really, really well so that all the ingredients are nice and uniform. I like to use a tablespoon to grab the meat to make my meatballs so that they all stay around the same size, but you can use any spoon or ice cream scoop that works for you. And what I do is I take the meat out and then just roll it up really well and put it on this baking tray that I'm going to then put into the oven to bake these meatballs. I ended up with 33 meatballs. So this is what they look like cooked up. This particular meat was 75%, and it's not usually what I use, but it was given to us by a friend, and I always appreciate free food. So I certainly wasn't going to say no to free food. And so what I did was, I don't normally put it on a paper towel to soak up some of the grease, but this is what I did this particular batch of meatballs. And again, I ended up with 33 meatballs. I laid all these out, let them cool, and then I'll put them into some Ziploc bags to put in the freezer. And then when I want to have meatballs, I'll just put them in a pan of some sauce and cook them up on the stove, and we could have spaghetti and meatballs or meatball subs. So here I'm just portioning some of these into some sandwich size bags to make a couple of meals out of them. And there's a little trick I use because I don't end up vacuum sealing these, because we end up using them so quickly it just feels like a waste to use up my vacuum bags. So I usually will zip most of the bag and then take a straw and I will suck the air out of the bag, as much air as I can, and then I will seal it up. And it's kind of like a cheat way to get extra air out of the bag, and it looks like it's vacuum sealed, because again, we go through these meatballs pretty quickly and it just feels like a waste. You can vacuum seal them if you like, especially if you're doing a really big batch. If I'm doing a big batch, I will vacuum seal them, but this was only about 1.5 pounds of meat, so this is why I ended up in doing it this particular way. And I mean, if you don't have a vacuum sealer, this is really a great way to take the air out of the bag, so that way you don't get freezer burn. And then what I'll do is I will put these bags inside a freezer bag to just give them a little bit of extra protection. But here's a closer look at what they look like, and they look like little vacuum sealed bags. So the last meal I'm going to make with that beef is a shepherd's pie, and I'm taking some of my potatoes from my garden from this summer, and I've washed and peeled these, and then I'm going to cut them up because I find that when I slice them into smaller pieces, they boil a lot faster than if I would have left them as whole potatoes. So now that we've got our potatoes going in the boiling water, we're going to mash up our meat with our meat chopper to make it smaller. And we're going to brown this really well. While our meat is cooking, I'm going to start on the brown gravy. And I really have begun to dislike using these brown gravy packets because of all the additives in them and salt and other not really great things, but I'm using all of these up, and then I'm going to start making my own brown gravy from scratch. But the brown gravy is going to end up going in our meat. And now that the meat has finished browning up, I'm going to drain the grease out of it. I absolutely love this strainer. You can get them at places like Target or Walmart, but they also have them on Amazon, and that's where I got mine from. I mean, they work great for getting the grease out of meat. They work great for draining pasta. And the gravy's done now, so I'm going to put this into the meat and mix it up really well. And next up, we're going to add any brand, homemade, store-bought. Another thing I'm getting rid of, I can't wait to make my own. But you're going to add a couple of tablespoons of barbecue sauce to the meat that has the gravy, and this just gives it a little extra flavor. And now that my potatoes are fork tender, I'm going to take these out and drain them and start working on the mashed potatoes. So when I go to restaurants and we get bread, there's always these little butter packets that are left over when all the bread is gone. And a lot of the times they throw these away at restaurants. So I end up taking these home, and they're handy for putting them in mashed potatoes or other recipes where you just need a small amount of butter. So here I'm just going to add a few bits of these packages of butter. I'm going to add some milk. And I'm not adding any seasoning to this because we like our potatoes plain on top of our shepherd's pie, but you are certainly welcome to add any seasonings that you might like. Now I'm going to start filling my trusty loaf pan with all of the goodies that we've been working on cooking. So first off, I'm going to add the meat that we cooked on the stove into the bottom of my loaf pan. And now we're going to add the corn. I have started using organic frozen corn instead of using canned corn, but you can use whatever you like, and you could also use as much or as little corn as you like. We don't like a ton, so I just did a small layer onto the meat, and now I'm going to add the mashed potatoes that I just mashed up on the top and smooth these over really nice before we put this in an oven that has been preheating at 350 degrees. You know your shepherd's pie is done when some of the gravy starts oozing up through the potatoes on the sides. It's usually about a half an hour in the oven. And here I'm scooping some out for my daughter. She absolutely loves shepherd's pie. I find this is such an easy, comforting meal, and it's one of my husband's absolute favorites. And it took me quite a while to perfect the recipe to get it to the way we really liked it. But with the brown gravy and the barbecue sauce in the meat, it really has made it very flavorful. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video and making it to this point. If you enjoyed the video, I hope you would consider liking, subscribing, commenting, or sharing with any of your friends or family where the information from my video might help them out. And as always, my friends, stay safe and be well.